Change your diet, change your life, change the planet.
Tim Van Orden here with the Running Raw Project, and today I've got another edition of Health in the News, and this is some really big stuff today. It's a study that just came out of the UK and was published in the November issue of Diabetologia, which is the journal for diabetes doctors and scientists, and it's all about sitting. Researchers focused on two groups of people in these studies. They looked at those that had the greatest amount of sedentary or sitting time, and they looked at those that had the least amount of sedentary or sitting time. And what they found was startling. The more time you spend sitting, the greater your risk of diabetes, heart disease, and death. The group that sat the most, their risk of heart disease went up 250%, and the risk of dying from a heart attack went up 90%. The risk of getting diabetes went up 200%, and the risk of dying from all-cause mortality, which means dying sooner than they should, went up by 49%. Now, these results were adjusted to remove exercise and diet from the equation so that sitting would be the only relevant variable. So just by sitting, you're increasing your risk of heart disease, diabetes, and death significantly. And they found that even groups that exercised on a regular basis, if they sat for long periods of time, their risk of heart disease, diabetes, and death increased, even though they were exercising. These researchers wanted to make it very clear, though, that exercise is still important. They're not saying that you don't need to exercise. But sitting is a very important factor that we need to start taking into consideration. So it's not just our diet or our level of exercise, but it's also how much time we spend sitting throughout the day. This data also showed that the average person spends between 50 and 60% of their day sitting, sedentary, whether it's at a job in front of a computer, or it's in a car, on a bus, on a train, at night, watching TV, eating. We spend way too much time sitting, 50 to 60% of our day. That's a lot. And it's having a huge impact on our health. These researchers were very curious as to why this was happening. What about sitting increases the likelihood of major disease? And the first thing they looked at was glucose metabolism. And it seems that sitting has a dramatic effect on how the body metabolizes glucose. When we sit, our muscles are a lot less active. They're not doing as much, because the chair, the table, the desk, the couch, whatever it is doing most of the work for us. But when we're standing or being active in other ways, our muscular system has to keep us upright and has to keep us moving. A lot more activity and a lot more demand for glucose, which is the sugar that fuels most of our cells a lot of the time. But when we're sitting, our cells don't require as much energy. And they found that when our muscle activity is greatly reduced, it increases insulin resistance in the cells. And this is essentially what type 2 diabetes is. Insulin is the hormone that takes the sugar out of your blood and delivers it into your cells so the cells can use it for energy. But if those cells are not being active because the muscles are at rest, you're sitting, there's no reason for those cells to have this energy. They don't want it. So insulin comes along with a suitcase full of glucose, and it knocks on the door, and the cell opens up the peephole, and it's like, yeah, no, sorry, not interested. Yeah, I gave it the office. Why don't you come back some other time? And they slam the peephole, and insulin's just standing there like, oh, what do I do? And it's got its little briefcase of glucose, and it keeps hanging out in the blood. Well, this is called insulin resistance. When the cells don't let insulin in the door to deliver its glucose payload. And this increases the amount of sugar in your blood because the cells aren't using it. Studies have shown that people who sit after eating have 24% higher blood glucose ratings than those that get up and walk slowly or do some form of physical activity. I'm not talking about exercise. I'm talking about just any kind of movement, even slow walking, which is what they used to do way back in the day in the 1800s, 1900s. After dinner, they'd get up and they'd walk around the house, or they'd go for a walk around town. But if you sit, your blood sugar rises by 24%. That's a lot. There's still a lot of research that needs to be done to fully understand the effects of sitting on the body and what other metabolic pathways are either not being used or being used adversely. But in the meantime, here's the recommendation. Get up and take a walk after you eat, especially if you're consuming a great deal of carbohydrates. Get up and move around throughout the day. When you're working at your desk, stand up every now and again. Go to the bathroom, walk around, talk to people, move. Don't just sit in a chair. I know people that have actually put their desks on top of treadmills. They've made like these little mini desks, and they walk at the slowest pace that the treadmill will move while they're working on their computer, a little laptop station there. So it's not like they're getting exercise, but they're moving their body. So find a way to get up and move more throughout the day. And this is different than exercise. This is just not sitting. Because the more time you sit, the greater the likelihood that you're going to die of diabetes, heart disease, or other causes. Even if you are eating a clean diet, and even if you are exercising, your risk goes up. So get up, stand up, and increase your longevity just by moving around and being a little bit more active. All right? I hope that's of value to you. I'm going to go stand up now and run up a mountain. See ya.